Good evening, everybody. My name's David Allen Patali, and I'm a West Australian author, and I'm the host of the Libby Book Club for WA. Thank you very much for joining me tonight, where my guest is debut author Jo Dixon. Jo is a writer from, well, all over. Originally Brisbane, lived in Bangkok for a bit, but now she is in Tasmania, and her book is The House of Now and Then. It should be flipped, but we'll work with that. Now, before we dive into chat with Jo, I just want to acknowledge that I am broadcasting to you tonight from the lands of the Whadjuk Noongar people, and I pay my respect to elders past and present. I'd also like to remind everybody that tonight's chat is live. You can jump into the chat function. You can type a question to Jo. You can type a question to me, anything and everything. Now, The House of Now and Then is a thriller. It's got lots and lots of twists. I'm going to do my absolute best to not give anything away. And also, if you have read the book, please do your best not to give everything away. That's part of the fun. But I think we can maybe flirt with it a bit. We can skirt the boundaries. Now, the Libby Book Club for WA is, of course, brought to us by the State Library of Western Australia. Thank you for your support there. And also Overdrive Australia. Now, The House of Now and Then is available on the Libby app with no holds. I know a lot of you have taken it out. I think at last count, Jo, you had 1,208 loans and 440 loans of physical, which is fantastic.
Wow.
The book is going really well. So great to have everybody here. Jo, welcome. How are you going tonight? It's 9 o'clock where you are.
It's 9 o'clock. It's about 5 minutes past my bedtime. But I was so looking forward to this, and I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's always good to have a nice booky chat. And I must say, you've got a very impressive library behind you.
Yeah, that's only part of it. There's more. I'm out in my studio where I write, but in the main house, there's more, about 5 times more than that.
Excellent. Well, you can't have a house without books. Now, Jo, speaking of houses, because we will talk architecture in a little bit, but can you tell us in your own words, what is The House of Now and Then about? It's quite a twisted story, isn't it?
It twisted in a good way.
Yeah.
We'll call it twisty. It's dual timeline. In the present day timeline, we've got Olivia, who has really made some mistakes. She's stuffed up on some big things very publicly. So she's run away to Tasmania to hide. Seems that Tasmania is a great place to hide. You can really get away from it down here. So she's run away to a remote house and she's laying low. And then unfortunately, she's got a friend of hers who's not very happy with her. And she's a bit worried about being found. And when a strange man turns up at her door, she's very concerned. But it turns out that he's trying to track down someone who lived in the house 30 years earlier. So she gets drawn into that. So that's the present day. And then we see what happened in the house 30 years earlier in the past, the 1986 timeline, where we meet Pippa and her friend Jeremy and his girlfriend. And they come down to house sit, this magnificent house, same house in Tasmania. And she falls for a local boy whose family is not very impressed by this relationship. And some things go wrong. And the boy disappears. Leo disappears. So we have dual timeline. In the one, we've got Olivia and this stranger trying to find out what happened and trying to find this woman. And in the past, we see the events of that year unfolding, all that summer unfolding.
Would you call this a thriller or a mystery? Because it never felt like it was leaning too much into the genre of either of those. It's its own thing. It's really its own thing.
It's really interesting. I was having this discussion on Threads, because I joined Threads, with a couple of authors about what the differences were. And to me, thriller is about pacing. So I probably wouldn't describe this as a thriller. A thriller to me is something like The Hike by Lucy Clark, or something where there's a sense of impending doom on your heels. There's a chase, there's a ticking clock, it's go, 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 go. So I don't think I've got that. Definitely suspense. There are some things hanging over all the characters that are coming closer and threatening them. Mystery, definitely. There's questions there to be answered. Crime, well, there's crimes committed. So I think I fall in the crime genre. But it's also very relationship based. So I don't know what we call that. I think my head of publishing
Oh,
at Harlequin called it cross genre or genre blending. So,
well, and I definitely agree. There's it's character driven. There's lots of great characters. And what I really, really appealed to me about the story is that it's very, you're inside a lot of the characters. It's very knowing. It's very knowingly told, and you're close to them. It's not cold and detached. That this stuff happened. You actually really get to know and care about this, large cast of characters, but also honed in through Pippa and Olivia. Was that challenging to write? There's a lot to marshal here, but also at the same time, it always has this propulsive forward movement.
was it hard to write? Yes. The short answer would be yes, because it was also because it was my first novel that I wrote, my first full-length novel. So I finished this back in 2017 after spending probably 2 or 3 years writing it. So it did take time, and I know it was my learning ground. In the process of writing it, I learned so much, but really getting deep into it, don't write in first person, I write in third, and learning to get that sense of knowing them from the inside while writing third person. It did take a lot of learning and a lot of redrafting and editing, and it just got better as I went along. Yeah, it was hard work though.
Yeah, I bet. And with the dual timelines as well. I mean, which character did you gravitate toward? Because Pippa has so much to her, but Olivia's got so much to her, and there's so much like synergy between them, and so much contrast as well.
Yeah.
Not just because of the differing timeline.
It's interesting because the two timelines, the history of this book coming to me is that they came to me as two separate stories. I live rurally down in Tassie, and I had to drive my kids to school in the city every day. So it was a 1.5 hour return trip in the morning, 1.5 hours in the afternoon. Teenage boys don't actually engage with conversation much in the moving car. So I had all this time on my hands. So I would plot these stories in my head, and I had them as two separate things. And then I wove them together. So both the women, Olivia and Pippa, resonated with me strongly, and I could see them clearly. And then they came to exist in the same book, and their stories became intertwined. And I was delighted that, no, I can't say that because that would give something away. It was lovely to have them together, shall we say, in the book. Of the two of them,
and you thought, this is working, this is
working, yeah, that somehow the two stories became, and I can't even remember the moment when I realized that they would fit together. Pippa is probably my favorite. She has the spunk and the gumption and freedom of living that I sometimes wish that I'd had. I never backpacked. People have asked me if I've ever backpacked, and I never have. So I lived vicariously through her.
Well, that was the thing. As someone, I did a lot of backpacking and did a lot of traveling. This made me want to travel again, because there's that. Yeah, there's also this element to it. I was going to say, the thing that unites the two timelines and the characters is the house. Can you tell us about the house of Now and Then?
The house was one of the first things to come to me, one of the first characters, we'll call it, that came to me. I have a passion for mid-century modern architecture. Those skillion roofs, the use of stone, the split levels, the use of wood and glass that came with that era. I wrote this as a house that I would want to live in. It just appealed to me.
And the story, but you had me at like the clean lines that stood in contrast to the bush. Yep. I mean,
yes, I know, and the location where the house is real. It exists. So the village in the book is fictional, but it's based very strongly on the village that I live closest to, which is called Woodbridge. And the geographical location of the house on this knob of land, not seen from the road, overlooking the channel, which is a stretch of water, that exists. So I took this real piece of geography and planted my perfect house on it, and then basically renamed my village to make it fictional.
And was it an advantage having the setting under your control, because you've got the different timelines, all the different characters? interacting, you could make them focus on a particular place.
Setting was so, sorry?
Also the village too, but you could control this. It's like they're like marionettes that you can have.
I think the setting was so important to me, and I set it where I live because I wanted to be really authentic in the describing. And being a beginner writer, as I class myself, I didn't want to write something from looking at Google Earth or from memory. I wanted to experience and write what I feel and see and hear and observe on a day-to-day basis. So the setting was something I could control because I see it every day. The weather, the animals, the bush, the inhabitants of the small village were all very close to my heart. And it was nice to have that thing that I knew well so I could write it with ease to a degree and with authenticity, I hope.
Well, it's a very immersive read. It's very atmospheric. It's had me reading at night. We've had a lot of bad weather in Perth lately, so that's been perfect.
Yeah.
I'm reading on my lunch break. I work by the Swan River, so the water's very turbulent, so that really added to the experience. I don't know if listening in has had similar experience to me in reading this, but yeah, I was hooked. Like it's like say you had me at the Modern House. Could you read an extract for us? Is there a section?
I could. Let me just
give us a taste, because then I think we can dive more into the mystery and the heart of it.
Okay. So I'm going to read from chapter 2, and I'm going to abbreviate this somewhat because I don't want to go on too long and bore you all to tears. But this is the second chapter, chapter 2, and it's set in the 2017 timeline. Gin suited Olivia perfectly. Legend declared it the drink of dejected, fallen women like her. She was, according to a million outraged folk on social media, a truly wicked woman, and much of the time she tended to agree. But on good days, she tried to think of herself as someone who had made some really bad choices and quite a few stupid mistakes. Either way, the gin helped. The cap on the new bottle gave a satisfying snap as she twisted it open. She poured for a slow count of 4, added a splash of tonic water, then went back down the wide steps to the living area. Brian was on the sofa, curled into her favourite blanket, the one made from the fleece of sacred alpacas and woven by the light of a blue moon, or something like that. The one that cost stupid money. The one that could, for a moment, make her think she was cherished. If her silence was going to be bought, then she could allow herself a few luxuries. She told herself this every time she hit add to cart and check out now. She bent over and whispered in his ear, "Love you, Brian, but that's my seat." He lifted his head to give a sleepy mew, but didn't move, and she didn't have the heart to push him out. He deserved alpaca more than she did. The raggedy ears and missing eyes showed his life had been tougher than hers. She sat cross-legged next to him, pulled a cushion into her lap and took a long drink of her G&T. The house had come fully furnished and the modular L-shaped sofa was large and comfortable. The blanket and cushions were her own touches, as was the portable Bluetooth speaker through which a mellow mix of Sufjan Stevens and Nick Drake was playing. When Brian rolled onto his back, she pulled out her phone and snapped a few photos. The light was soft, the fire flickering in the background, his front paws reaching out. She uploaded the best shot to Brian's Instagram account with the comment, "Living the life," in a slew of hashtags. Then scrolled for a few minutes through her carefully curated feed. Cats, stationery, cats, journaling, beautiful hotels, cats. Her finger hovered over the search icon. The urge to check in on Hayden flowed through her, shrinking her best intentions. Like a gambling addict faced with a row of sparkly, tinkling pokies. She no longer followed him and would have to tap in his name to see what he was doing. Chances were, despite everything, things were perfectly fine in his world. She sipped again and set the glass on the sublime mid-century coffee table, the one she didn't own, and nudged a small pile of mail. The yellow redirection stickers were a reminder to change her postal address. But what was the point? She didn't even know if she'd be staying there much longer, and none of this stuff was vital. Olivia flicked through the pile. The square pink envelope was last. It was sweet, lolly pink, the pink of ballet tights and bubble gum and little girls' pencil cases. The handwritten address was partly visible under the printed yellow sticker, written in vivid red and embellished with swirls and flourishes. Her heart lurched, thudding hard and fast at the base of her throat. She'd erased her social media, changed her email address and her number, cut all association with her old life, and moved to the middle of nowhere in Tasmania, the arse end of Australia. She was hidden from the world, her life small and quiet. For months there had been nothing from Lena. No angry messages, no veiled threats, no strange, gushing recollections of their exploits. The silence had been serene, and Olivia had relaxed a little, become complacent. She'd begun to believe that it had stopped, that her refusal to respond any further had finally sent a clear message. She'd been so stupid. Of course it wasn't over. It would never be over. Yeah.
Thank you, Jo. Oh, you can't escape your past. You can run.
Yeah.
I've got to say, I love how all throughout this book you just slip these jagged little lines in every now and again. If her silence was going to be bought, then she could allow herself a few luxuries. It just, oh, what's all that? Like, it's
thank you.
very enjoyable. No, I don't. Can we talk a little bit here about Olivia? She's quite a complex character in the sense that, yes, she's done some terrible things in the past, but in contrast to Pippa, she's done them publicly. And there's a digital record of all this. Whereas in the other timeline, people were just having fun. They were just being reckless and being kind of joyful. And there's I suppose another thing that confronts them. But what's Olivia's world like? What's her, I don't know, what's her sort of daily experience? What's colouring her like this?
Now, in where she's living in the house?
Yeah, in 2017.
I think it wasn't until I'd finished writing the book that I actually finally grasped what one of the major themes of the story was, and that was shame. How absolutely debilitating shame is as an emotion. And Olivia is grappling with destructive shame for what she's done, and shame that is amplified by having done it in a very, or having had it, have it exposed in a very public, the worst public way possible. And not being able to move on from that. And I think that colours her life, from meeting the stranger at her door, this hiding out, this not wanting to engage with anyone in her local community. I think shame and, to a degree, bitterness are just such debilitating emotions that can just remove someone from society to a degree. That need to hide, bury yourself and not be seen. I think that is the most profound thing for her, and that's the journey she goes on through this book, is getting to terms with that and coming out the other side of that.
And how can you overcome something like shame? This is the tricky part. We can't.
Oh, that's a good question.
Because it's not just as simple as come on, get up, get back out there and do things.
No, and especially when. Okay, without skirt round spoilers, when what she's done is never going to go away. There's a record of it, and not knowing who's aware of that when you go out on your day-to-day interactions. Has the person that you're talking to, do they know you from that event? Have they seen you at your worst? That's a hard thing to get to grips with and to move past. And in the end, I think it's people around you. If you are lucky enough as a person to have in that situation to have strong people around you who stand by you and who you can lean on and can help you hold your head up. Because in the end, the only way to do it is to face it down and to build up your own sense of self-worth.
Just got a few comments in the chat, Jo. Green says great extract, and the GNT I am sipping makes it all the more.
Oh, I love that.
It's definitely a book club. You know, it's a booze club. That's good.
Oh, nice.
That's very good. And so there's a few comments as well about, Tasmania. That it's over it's Bruny Island. You've got the D'Entrecasteaux?
D'Entrecasteaux Channel. but
That's
no one ever calls it by its full name.
you call it
It's just the channel.
channel.
The channel.
It's a beautiful part of Tasmania. I was lucky enough to go
Mm.
there in 2019. We went to the drive-through oyster shack, and
Yep.
I tried to look at Richard Flanagan's writing shack, but I couldn't find it. So
He recently sold that, actually. Yeah, it came up for sale.
I should have grabbed it. We could have passed that. Yeah, but it's a beautiful part of the world where you think, oh, I'd love to live here. Wouldn't it be great to have the quiet life? And for a while, Olivia does feel that, but it's not the quiet life she quite anticipated, is it?
She's drifting. She's drifting through her life for a while there without any anchoring to anyone or anything in her, anything that's holding her in place. She's cowering. She doesn't connect with the community for a long time, which is fine. We don't all have to run out and hold hands with our local community. But she's really isolated herself. So her existence there is just that. It's just existing. I don't think she's really relishing where she is, other than keeping her out of the public eye.
And then one day
Tom turns up.
But
knock on the door.
But she doesn't refuse the knock. She doesn't refuse the challenge of it. What is it about the stranger and the story and the possibility that she could engage with this mystery? What is it that makes her do that? I mean, it would be very easy for her to just...
Good question. I mean, at first she reacts very negatively. She's terrified. And then Tom, I think his nature wins her over. He's a bit of a dork, really. He's one of my favorites, actually. He's not very non-threatening. And he makes an effort to allay her fears and to explain who he is and what's going on, and to be humble and not try and force his way in or be strident about anything. So I think it's his humble, slightly bumbling nature that lets her drop her defenses a little bit. And also he doesn't seem to know who the hell she is, which is very reassuring.
I've got a question here from Christina, which chimes quite nicely. Are there any local characters in the book who are based on or inspired by locals that you know in Tasmania?
Very good question, Christina. Only one. Wendy at the post office, Wendy the postmistress, is not only based, is fully formed version of my postmistress. So my postmistress is Kelly at the Woodbridge post office, and she is in the book. Like, Kelly and Wendy are one and the same person. And that is exactly how my post office is. We don't get mail delivery. No one delivers mails to your gate. You have to go into the village to get your mail, into this little post office, tiny little post office, with Kelly, who knows everybody and everything that's going on. And all those interactions around the post office are just totally the way it is. And I've got to say that my community, we're a tiny village. It's probably, I think there's probably locally 400 people, 500 people maybe. They were so excited and thrilled to see I should have just named the village Woodbridge in the book, but they were just thrilled to have this little location and to see a local person portrayed so vividly in the story. So yes, there was, but only one. And she wanted to be in the book and was delighted to be there.
It sounds like she'd have been absolutely offended if she wasn't in the book.
Oh.
Yeah.
No. And she runs that post office. There's a scene, and this is not a spoiler, but right at the end you see the way that how she knows, the postmistress knows everybody in the community, to the point where, if a letter, I've seen letters arrive at our post office addressed to, Uncle Bob in Woodbridge, and she will find that person, track them down. She knows who's who and how they're connected, and it's wonderful. But she doesn't gossip. So.
But then I was going to say, it's such a tight village with such local knowledge, but in the House of Now and Then, there's the mystery at the heart of it. Leo, he's never seen again. How could this happen? I really, really enjoy how in the novel you take your time to explore these relationships, to set everything up so that it all pays off later. It's not just glossing over, oh, then this happened and that happened. It's you get to feel the perspectives, you get to feel the emotions, you get to feel the connections, and then things start to happen. Was that almost like the luxury of having the two timelines, that you could really flesh these things out in order to get the maximum impact?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, that's a, thank you for saying that. I take that as a great compliment. It's a bit hard to explain. And when I wrote the story, I wrote the two timelines concurrently. I didn't write all of one and then all of the other and then mesh them together. I wrote the book pretty much in a linear fashion from beginning to end, jumping from timeline to timeline as I wrote it. And if I say that I had a sense of it as I was writing it, a feel for it, and it's almost like a rhythm, like music, of knowing when to move from one timeline to the other and back again, and I'm not explaining it very well, because I really, it's just a sense of when it was time to move from one to the other. And that the reveals in each timeline fed into each other. I don't know if I'll ever be able to do it again, to be quite honest. Of course I can. I should be able to do it again, but I am.
3 timeline. Let's go.
But it was definitely, it was intentional, but it was a sense that I had as I wrote the book, of the pieces melding together and fitting together and flowing in one narrative, if that makes sense.
It does. And can we talk about Pippa and Leo? Because, it's a perfect summer. They're having a great time in the house. It should work out, but it really doesn't. Can you talk us through at least a bit of that story, where it's bitterly disappointing, but also beautiful. And then at the core, very tragic.
It's such a beautiful story. I wanted to have a love story at the center of it. So there is this love story of Pippa and Leo, and that idyllic summer setting that we can, most of us at some stage have been caught up in a summer of fun and frivolity and freedom before real life hits you in the face later on. And that moment was frozen for them because Leo goes missing. And that's not a spoiler, because I think it says it on the back of the book. So there's and that's coming. So you read their love story with trepidation, because you know that there's some unfortunate events coming towards it. But I loved writing it because there was that joyous feel of these two young people coming together and facing hurdles, unfortunately.
And then in the 2017, Olivia, with her shame, but also a real sense of justice, a real sense of something terrible has gone on here, and flawed though I may be, I'll get to the bottom of this.
In regard to what was done to her?
In regard to the 86 timeline, Pippa.
Yeah, I think both Olivia and Tom get very caught up, Tom for different reasons. But I think trying to solve this mystery of the past helps Olivia step outside of her own existence or her own misery, I guess. It turns her focus outward instead of looking inward. So she's looking at someone else's problem or something that needs to be solved. So her mind is taken elsewhere. It's good for her. She is able to step away from her own misery in going to look for this unsolved crime. And I think what you were saying before about the difference between how things are played out in the public eye between 1986 and 2017 is that there's not even very much on this disappeared lad. There's so little to go on. There's no record really of it. There's no public, there's no video of it. There's not the things that we have now when kids go missing. So there's very little for them to go on. So it's a mystery that needs to be solved.
Yeah. How long did this take you to write? This is your debut novel, but you've got another one on the ball now. There's a lot of great comments here. Like Tina, love the book. I'm waiting for the next one. 3 thumbs up. And I just want to say
you.
sorry, anyone having audio problems, sorry. We're doing,
Oh.
so it's okay for us here, but there will be a recording that will be shared as well. So if you're missing out because of any audio issues, don't worry. We'll stick with us if you can. I think everybody else is okay. But so
sorry.
Melanie is saying, I'll leave that for a little later because it's a TV series. But so I can't remember where I was. So debut novel for you, another one on the boil. This is something that you started quite a few years ago, like 2015. That's
2015, I started writing it. I was living in Bangkok with my husband and kids, and while he could work, I wasn't allowed to work there. So I was bored. Kids were at school, so for several years prior to that, I thought I was going to get serious about writing. I've always wanted to be a writer. I've always written. And I thought, well, if not now, when? I've got to get on. I've got to do this. So when I was in Bangkok, I did a Master's of Arts in writing. And as part of that, I had to do the first 30,000 for a novel. So the 30,000 that was written that year is pretty much the backstory of Jeremy and Pippa before they go to Tasmania. It never made it to the book, but it set the wheel in motion.
And you had that in as your the iceberg, the big
thing.
Yeah,
the big thing under the water. And I got 30,000 words done, which was, I'd never written that much before, so it felt pretty good. Then when we came back to Tassie, I just kept going with it. So it probably took me 3 years to really get it to something resembling what it is now. And then it took me a really long time to get a publisher, like years of rejections. And then it happened very suddenly.
That's great.
Yeah, it was wonderful, actually. Yeah, very exciting. So now I've got book 2 is coming out in January, and I'm just, as we speak, I'm trying to pull together book 3 to get that ready.
Okay. Do you have a title for book 2?
A title is A Shadow at the Door. A Shadow at the Door, and that will be out in January.
And what can we expect? Is it something in a similar vein, or is it kind of different? Or
it's a little bit different. I actually wrote the second manuscript after The House of Now and Then whilst waiting to get published. So The House of Now and Then, I submitted, pitched to various people, been rejected beautifully over and over. Nothing had come of it. So I just went on and started writing a second book. It is a little bit different because I thought, well, maybe my first book was just too much. It was too complex, too tricky. So the second book is not dual timeline. It is multiple points of view. It is twisty, a little bit ominous. It is Tassie as well. It's set in Hobart. So it's probably a similar feel to it, but not quite as complex as this one was. But the third book, which I'm working on, it'll probably be dual timeline again. So I'm coming back to that.
I was going to say as well, with Tasmania, setting a book in Tasmania, it's so much light and shade. Like what we were talking about before. The first few chapters where you're in 2017 with The House of Now and Then, it's dark, it's gloomy, but then you can go back 1986 to the beautiful Tasmanian idyllic bucolic summer that then turns dark. You have this to turn the light on and off in Tasmania.
And Tassie's, and that sums up Tasmania basically. I deliberately set them in different seasons so there would be that contrast. But Tassie is beautiful, stunningly beautiful. Half the state is locked up in national parks, so there's wildness everywhere. And it's beautiful but dangerous. So people die literally on Mount Wellington, which overlooks the city. People die on that mountain within view of the city. If they go up there climbing in the snow or what have you, or go for walks and get lost. People disappear into the bush and are never seen again because Tassie devils eat everything. There's a dark past here. There's dark history, going back hundreds of years. So there is, I think, that dichotomy in Tasmania anyway, way of beauty of light and of dark. And I think you become very aware of it when you're down here. And I think it's one of the reasons Tassie's very on trend at the moment.
Oh, well, I visited Tassie in 2019. I went into a fern grove, massive old Jurassic style ferns. I was the only person around, and I got that. Have you ever had that sort of terrified feeling when you're alone in the bush? I had that. It was just, it was so beautiful where I was, but it also really creeped me out.
Because you know that you're outside of your element. And it's, I mean, we've got the tragic case of down here at the moment of a young Belgian woman who went hiking and she's never been seen again. And that's only just happened in June. No sign, no trace. Her car found in the start of the track and just gone. See, we're getting quite dark now, but danger is very present here. I mean, we have ants that can kill you. I mean, that just does my head in every day.
And then dark mofo, you've got.
And then we have dark mofo, which revels in the darkness.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that is, dark mofo is truly something. I don't think it could be run anywhere else in the country.
No. What was your favorite part of writing The House of Now and Then? Was it exploring all your characters and getting it all set, or was it the rewriting where you said earlier you started to click and you figured things out? Because this is a very twisty story. How?
Yeah.
Say, how did you build the building? But how did you build the building? Was it knowing, or did things just kind of fall into place, or a bit of both?
Coming at the first part of your question about which part I enjoyed the most, I actually love the editing, the redrafting, the making it better. And some of my strongest revelations come during that process. So I think I was saying to you before we went to air that there's a major twist in this book that I didn't know was going to be there. And I was up to about the fourth or fifth draft, and it just came to me and it blew my mind, and I just added it, and it's pretty much exactly the way I wrote it when it first occurred to me. It was never really changed. And that sensation of the story becoming stronger and more well-shaped, and taking a clearer form. And also, I know this probably sounds strange as a writer, but my characters become clearer to me the longer I hang out with them. So I'm not someone who sits here and does character definitions and descriptions ad infinitum before I start writing. I wait for the characters to come to me as I write. So I have a sort of a paper cut out of them, and then the more time I spend with them and the more time we are together in the story, the clearer they become, and the more well-rounded they become, more 3D, I guess. So for me, the editing, the redrafting, all of that's what I love. The making it great or better.
And hanging out with the characters. Rebecca in the chat says, "I loved Maggie. She was a beacon of light in all the darkness." Yeah. Did you like hanging out with Maggie and giving her? Yeah.
I've got to think about Maggie now. Oh yes. Sorry, it's been a while. Yeah, she was gorgeous. And I loved her as a counterpart to the rest of that family. And I should tell you a funny story about the Cliffords, who are Leo's family. When you would know this, when you go through the editorial process, your editors check for everything. They check that the songs you're using were released in that year, that the food you're talking about was available at that time. They're thorough. What they didn't pick up was that the family that I had used, the Cliffords, in the book, the Cliffords are a snobbish family who live in Sandy Bay, which is a very well-to-do suburb of Hobart, and they're into yachting. And it's not giving much away to say that the parents are not very nice people in this book. On my official launch night here in Hobart, someone pointed out to me that there is a family in Sandy Bay called the Cliffords, that they're well revered by the community, and they build big catamarans, the big in-cat catamarans, and they are very into yachting. Oh, no. And I realized that both myself, because I'm not a born and bred Tasmanian, and of course my editor, none of us had picked up that we had referenced this Clifford family of Sandy Bay. And of course, every library visit I do down here now, and everywhere I go, people go, "Did you know? Was that deliberate?" It was like,
Oh, no.
I'm so sorry. And I almost feel like I need to write a letter to the Cliffords to say, "I'm really sorry."
Right, yeah. Send them a signed copy at least. Yeah.
Send them a signed copy. And luckily the names were different. I didn't use the same names. So.
Well, you never know. They might enjoy it. So.
I might. But yeah, in the Clifford family, Maggie is delightful. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask as well, like, we touched on the darkness there. I'd like to dive into that a little bit. So, but just from a bookie perspective, with all the books behind you, who inspires you as a writer? What puts you onto these things? What writers have informed you and shaped you? And
okay, I do like the thriller ones. So Ruth Ware out of the UK, Adele Parks here in Australia, Jane Harper, of course, everyone's going to say that. Sarah Bailey, Sarah Barry, they sound similar, those two as well. But also, it's not there. I love the writing of Vanessa McCausland, who has just put out Dreaming in French, and the one before that, The Beautiful Words, The Lost Stories of Secret Valley, or something like that. Her writing is just beautiful, beautiful. So her writing by style I love, but the darkness of those thriller-esque type ones does appeal to me, I must admit. But I like a story that's got characters and plot. So it can't be just too plot driven. You have to have characters that you care about to get involved in that story. So yeah, I like a bit of both.
I'd agree. And there's the house now that you've got grit, Jo. There's a lot of grit to this story. Where do you think that came from? That in your life, in your influences or your interests, or
good question. Probably my own life. Yeah, I would say probably there's a resilience in some of these characters that I like to think I've got myself. Interestingly, I'll give you this little snippet. I was, and this is getting a little bit personal, but I don't mind. It's not a secret. I was diagnosed with Parkinson's about 3 years ago, early onset Parkinson's. So I've had it since I was about 47, I think. That was about 7 years ago. So, things like that have knocked me for 6 at different times. And I guess my own process around that is, well, I've only got a limited time. All of us have only got a limited time. You've got to make the most of everything. And that mantra, if not now, when, absolutely dominates my life, because quite seriously, if you don't do it now, when are you going to do it? That thing that you want to do it, because you don't know what's going to hit you. You might get hit with a diagnosis like Parkinson's, or something far worse, or something goes wrong in your life, or you lose someone. That don't put off. This is something you truly want to do, and there's no really big reason stopping you. Just do it. Give it a go, because you don't know when you won't be able to at all.
And so, in writing in the house now and then, in the face of all rejections, doing this, what was it like going to the page for you? What did writing become for you in this process? You started off, give it a go. How did it evolve for you?
You know what? In time, so 2009 was the first year that I really truly said to myself, I'm going to get serious about writing. I mean, when I say I've always written, I mean I've always, from preschool, I've written stories. But in 2009, I distinctly remember thinking, I'm going to get serious. In the time between 2009, doing this book in 2015, finishing it in 2017, all the periods of rejection, writing the second one, I have tried to walk away from writing so many times because it is time consuming and it is absorbing and it takes so much of you, and there's so many other things you can be doing. Like we've got a property here, I've raised 2 kids, and I've felt guilty and I've tried to walk away. So writing is something I guess can't seem to get away from. I can't leave it. So to have it, to get to this point where a book is out there and people are enjoying it and telling me that they liked it, is just astonishing. It's so affirming, and it makes it all worthwhile. And it's still, to this day, somewhat surreal. Yeah.
Thank you, Jo. And the house now and then it's stunning. So well done.
Oh, thank you.
And what do you think of your cover? Is that the house?
No, it's not the house. I love the cover. I think my art department did a fabulous job on it. When it first came out, it was nothing like what I expected. But I think it got the feeling across. The house isn't right, but it was impossible to find a picture that really did justice to what was in my head. So that we went with the mood and the feeling. I think they got that. There's both a glow in that cover, there's light, but there's also dark and shadow and a sense of ominous. So I think it sold what it is very well.
I always love the reverses of covers.
Yes.
There's lots of little detail here on the bottom, and it's just like we're in the shadow here.
Or even the spine where it's just got the girl in the window.
Yeah.
Love that.
That's cool.
That's so clever. We don't really authors don't really get a lot of say in their covers. They tend to show you something and say, "What do you think?" And you go, "Oh, I love it." I think the cover for the next book they've just shown me today or yesterday, and my first reaction was, "Oh, I love it." And then I get nitty gritty and I go, "Oh, it's not quite what I pictured, or it's not quite what she'd be seeing out her window." So, but on the whole, I do. Seriously, such an amazing job. I'm very happy with it.
Over your right shoulder, that's you?
That's the house of now and then. There.
Yes. Yeah.
Stack of them.
Really right. I've got a few questions in the chat, but look, we've got about 13 minutes left. So if anyone has a question for Jo, please put it in the chat and I'll put it to her. So Jayho says, I listened to the audio. The narrator is excellent audio. I'm assuming on overdrive, which came through.
Yep.
How was the narrator chosen?
So when the audiobook production company signed my book, so the book publisher pitches the novel to audiobook producers and they say yay or nay. And I got rejected by the first 2 or 3 audiobook producers, and then Wave Sound, who were the producers, came on board. So they took it and they loved it. And then they sent me 3 or 4 audition tapes from different narrators. And it was the most magical moment to listen to a really great narrator reading your book, because it suddenly sounds different. I'm getting a different experience from it. But when Fallon, her audition came up, I just thought I loved it. She made me laugh. And she had a lightness in her voice when she was doing the humorous sections. And she was very new to audiobook narration, I think. And so I guess I picked her. So they gave me 4 and I got to pick the one who got the job, which was nice.
It's fantastic. I love that. And Barbara says, just very complimentary, I'm so glad it was finally published and we have the opportunity to have enjoyed your story. I mean,
oh, thank you.
You seem a very determined person. What finally got it over the line for you? With you went with HarperCollins. Harlequin.
Harlequin, which is an imprint of HarperCollins. What finally got me over the line? Persistence. Yeah. Actually, so when you're pitching a novel in Australia, you don't have to have an agent. There are these opportunities you get to pitch what you've written directly to publishers. And through the Australian Society of Authors, they have something called speed dating, literary speed dating. So you get 3 minutes on a Zoom call like this to blare what your book's about, and they will respond with yes, they want to read it, or no, they don't. So I've done that a couple of times and been rejected, and the House of Now and Then has been rejected all over the place. And then I booked a pitch through the Australian Society of Authors. I nominated to pitch to Harlequin, and it was coming up to the day, and I thought, oh, what is the point of doing this? Nobody likes this book. It's been rejected. I can't be bothered doing this again, blah, blah, blah. In the end, I thought, no, I've got nothing to lose. I've got my slot booked. It's 3 minutes. Just do it. So I pitched to Nicola Robinson. She said yes straight away. I sent her the first 3 chapters, I think. She came back straight away and said, send me the full book. So this is about 48 hours later. I sent her the full book. She came back to me within a number of days and said, I love it. What else have you got? You said you've got something else. I said, yes, I've got a second manuscript, which happens to actually be on the desk of another publisher in your publishing house. It's been there for a year. And she said, send me that. She came back and said, I love that too. She said, I'm going to take you to acquisitions, which is the meeting where they make the decision. And 3 weeks after the pitch, I was signed with a 2-book contract. Yes. So after all those years.
It's big. Wow. Yeah.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What do they say? There's a lot of work that goes into being an overnight success.
An overnight success, yeah.
Wow, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. And
no, don't give up. Keep trying. But when I say don't give up, you've got to also face that sometimes not giving up means that you're going to just keep putting the work in. You've got to keep going.
Absolutely. And how long has the House of Now and Then been out? When did you launch?
January, 4th of January. So we've just passed the 6-month mark, and it's done pretty well, actually. I'm very happy with it.
Yeah, well, it's definitely finding an audience, even just here on Libby. So
that's so good to hear.
So getting lots of great compliments on the chat, actually. So Julianne says, yep, I agree with you, Jay. The narrator is excellent. And Julianne's also listed some of the authors that you've mentioned: Jane Harper, Sarah Bailey, Sarah Bally, Vanessa McCausland. They're all available on the, so we can read what inspires you. So now Tina's asking, just to continue, when you got rejected from publishers, any tips to survive that? I mean, keep writing.
Yeah, that's a good question.
A second pour of gin, or
another gin? Yes, yeah, that happens quite a bit. It's where you set your expectations. I expected to get rejected. I know that sounds awful, but I had more expectation of being rejected than getting picked up, certainly in the early days. And what I did was I took the manuscript. The first few times it was rejected, I thought, I need to work on it. So I did some work on it. I did go and get a manuscript assessment done on it. So I got feedback, a solid 5 pages of feedback from someone in the industry. And that costs money. So that's, I'm privileged to have been able to do that. But getting that feedback gave me direction and what needed to be tweaked and pulled and readjusted. So having that outside input was worth it. And like I said, there were times I just didn't want to keep going. And I walked away for 6 months or so and just thought, this is the most stupid thing. Who am I kidding? And rejection does hurt. There's always disappointment. But it toughens you up for when you get your first 1-star review. So the sense of rejection sometimes doesn't ever fully go away.
It's a strong reaction, but yes, it's well, I mean, just maybe a bit more like an artistic kind of question. Like, for people who have either read the book, listening in, or people who are considering it, what do you hope people take away with them when they've read The House of Now and Then? What as the artist, as the person creating this, what feeling do you want them to have, or understanding do you want them to have?
I love this question. The first one is that they've enjoyed themselves, that I want people to have a sense of being fully absorbed in the story. and caring what happens to the characters. What I would like, my dream is that people finish this book, put it down, and they're still thinking about it. That to me is the sign of a good book. That book hangover, they call it, where the next day or the couple of days after, you're still thinking about how unfair something was, or if something hadn't happened, then that character would have got that and there would have been a different ending, or if the twists are still playing over in your mind, you're thinking, if only so-and-so hadn't done that, or what have you. I love the idea of my book lingering with people. And I did read this great quote from someone who said, I can't remember who said it, for most people, what remains from a good book is not the plot, but the characters. They are what you remember later. So I like the idea of people remembering one or two of the characters, going forward, that they'll remember the characters from this book. Yeah, that would be what I'd like people to take away.
I think people have, Jo. There's, Laura's saying, I have that hangover too. J-Ho, I'm still thinking about it. I have that hangover. You may be pretty hungover too. So. Now, this is a book club. So books, what do they mean to you? Reading, the look at that. Yeah.
Look, I'm sure that this is going to be the same for many people in this club. They're everything. They are joy. They are problem solvers. They are escape. They are lessons. There is a book for, and this is why sometimes you'll start a book and put it down because it's not the right time for that book. There are books for different times, for different moments in your life. There are books that you'll come back to. There are books that will never work for you. Everyone feels different about them. I just think books are magic. They're the ability to tell stories and share stories with other people is just magic to me. I think it's an addiction. I will never stop acquiring books, and I love to support other authors, especially Australian authors. I think, and being allowed into this other side of the book world, this publishing side of the book world, is just my wildest dreams. It's so exciting.
Jo, I can't think of a better answer to that question. That's fabulous. Barbara is saying, goal achieved. I've definitely thought about the character and story long after finishing the book.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you.
That's right. Up all night reading your book and hungover too. She also, just a final little question. Do you think a book finds you?
Yes. This is books that you read. Yes. This is where people in the, whether it's your librarians, your bookstore sellers, the people, friends who recommend books to you, the power of the word of mouth is the most wonderful thing. And this is why I like, books around you, that people will ask you what's on your shelf or talk to you about them. We should all share what we read. And even if we didn't like something, we can share it still, because what you don't like about something might appeal to someone else very much. So I think books do find us, but we have to listen for them too. We have to listen out for those hints and clues to what we should pick up.
Jo, that's almost all the time we have. It's been an hour that's flown by.
It has flown by. Thank you.
And thank you for staying up so late past your bedtime.
Oh gosh, it's
like
my dogs will be on the bed by now and they're fast asleep.
Absolutely. Well, congratulations. The House of Now and Then is an
absolute. Thank you, David.
I thoroughly enjoyed reading it. I think everybody here in the chat has enjoyed reading it too for Libby Book Club for WA. We're really appreciative of your time. And thank you for creating this, like you say, this portable piece of magic that is you.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure and joy. I've really enjoyed the chat. Great chat.
Yeah, and good luck for book 2 and book 3. Well, we might see you here again, actually. So
I'd love to come back. I really, really would. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And to everyone in the chat, the recording of this is going to be up on the YouTube channel in a couple of days. And you can also join me on Wednesday, the 30th of August for Together We Read WA. It's a special event for Libby that's going to be also held. The different chapters of it are going to be held across Australia. So we're going to be talking to Kirsty Manning about the Paris mystery. Have I got that in? So,
yep.
But For this month, The House of Now and Then, Jo Dixon, take a bow. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good night. And rug up. It's pretty cold tonight. So hope you have a good book on.